Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video on the channel. Welcome to episode number 3 of my 2024 Formula 1 season roundups. This time we are discussing what went on in the Miami Grand Prix weekend. F1 Academy returned to action this weekend. If you want to see my F1 Academy roundup over on TikTok, the link will be down for that in the description below. But let's talk about Formula 1 and what happened this weekend in the Miami Grand Prix. As always, we'll start off and talk about what happened in the sprint and then what happened in the Grand Prix, and then after that we'll talk about each team individually in what was a fantastic weekend. So let's delve in to the racing action. The race itself would happen on the Sunday as usual, although saying that we've had 2 rounds this season with the Grand Prix being on the Saturday, but there was a Saturday race and that came in the form of the sprint where Max Verstappen would put himself on pole position in the Friday sprint qualifying. The sprint format's changed from 2023 to 2024, where the sprint qualifying happens on the Friday instead of the Grand Prix qualifying. The sprint race is the first session to happen on the Saturday, followed by the Grand Prix qualifying that's typically in the Saturday last session. The Grand Prix is usually on Sunday and remains on Sunday in the sprint weekends, and FP1 is on Friday, just one practice session at sprint weekends. But during the race, Max Verstappen would hold off despite a safety car period and win the sprint race. He finished ahead of Charles Leclerc and teammate Sergio Perez, and it was a great result for all 3 of them. Max continuing where he left off in China. Obviously he didn't get pole like he wanted to for the sprint race in China, but he did this time around and it was absolutely phenomenal. There was an incident at the start involving Lando Norris, Lance Stroll, Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, and Hamilton slid down the inside. Norris spun out. Stroll made contact. Norris and Stroll were forced to retire. Alonso was to carry on, but in the end it didn't matter. Hamilton would receive a penalty post-race for speeding in the pit lane during the safety car conditions. But the interesting thing is that his battles with Kevin Magnussen was spicy at the highest order. Both drivers getting penalties. Lewis not for the crashes. Magnussen got 3 separate penalties during the race, 1 for track limits and 2 for leaving the track and gaining an advantage in the Grand Prix. But the qualifying first of all, and it was Max Verstappen on pole position. He got ahead of 2 Ferraris, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. It was Sergio Perez 4th, and the 2 McLarens, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, were 5th and 6th. Mercedes, for the first time that weekend, got both cars and got at least 1 car into Q3. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Both Aston Martins were out in Q2. The DNF for Stroll and the incident at turn 1 in the sprint set them off for an awful Saturday, where they, at least for where they'd want to be. In the sprint, however, Daniel Ricciardo finished 4th ahead of Sainz. Great result from Ricciardo after some robust and really strong defensive driving. However, he was knocked out in Q1 come the Grand Prix qualifying. But in the Grand Prix, you know now by the title, Lando Norris grabbed his first Formula 1 victory that sent F1 into absolute spirals of thrill and enjoyment. And it was an absolute pleasure to see Lando Norris cross the line in first place. After Russia 2021 and Austin 2023, many people wondering, would he ever get this first Grand Prix victory or even any time soon? But what a job he did. Oscar Piastri was near the front for most of it, but unfortunately after an incident with Carlos Sainz, he damaged his front wing and had to pit after a safety car. Norris used the safety car to huge advantage where homeman Logan Sargent was taken out by Kevin Magnussen. Kevin Magnussen will once again be awarded a penalty by the stewards, and it will be one of 2 penalties he will receive in the Grand Prix alone. Max Verstappen would finish in second position after the safety car restart when Lando had pitted and was in front. Lando managed to pull 7 seconds on Verstappen. Leclerc would finish in third position. Sainz would originally cross the line in fourth place, however, due to a 5-second time penalty picked up for causing a collision with Oscar Piastri, he lost fourth to Sergio Perez. Lewis Hamilton would finish 6th. Both Mercedes would score points. Esteban Ocon would score Alpine's first point. Just the one retirement, and now let's delve in to each team's performance across the weekend. Now we begin, as we always do, with Red Bull Racing. This is Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. Red Bull came into the weekend with Adrian Newey being announced that he would leave the team and stop working with the Formula 1 team immediately, but he will continue to work at Red Bull behind the scenes, building the hypercar and working on that side of the fence. However, he will leave Red Bull in early 2025 permanently when his technical F1 gardening leave will be up. And he came into this weekend with a lot of media talk around him, not necessarily Max Verstappen, and Red Bull will look to see that they can do and go on to win things without Mr. Newey. However, Verstappen did not win the Grand Prix. He won the sprint, and a lot of people thought when he topped sprint qualifying that this was going to be another one of those weekends. He topped FP1 despite having issues, which just made his invincibility seem possible. He'd already won the first 2 Miami Grand Prix in 2022 and 2023, but he couldn't win this one. He finished second, which is still a strong result. His closest two in the championship finished behind him in Perez and Leclerc. He is in control of the championship lead. He has extended his lead on the others inside the top 4. Lando Norris, the only one to gain on his advantage, but McLaren looks strong. We'll talk about that later. As for Sergio Perez, another strong showing from him for me. I think, to be honest with you, although he wasn't on the podium in the Grand Prix, he still finished in close enough retrospect to his teammate. He's not beaten his teammate, but again, expectations sit that Verstappen does beat Perez 9 times out of 10. So really, Perez, although he didn't beat him, he was fairly close, and I think that's a good weekend for Perez, despite only having 1 podium out of 2 in comparison to Verstappen. That is Red Bull done. Now let's move on to Ferrari, where Adrian Newey is very much rumoured to go, but it is yet to be confirmed, and negotiations are really yet to be in motion. What I mean by that is that, there are rumours floating about, but those are just rumours, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are the Ferrari pairing. Obviously, Carlos Sainz, his last Miami Grand Prix as a Ferrari driver, and at the moment his last Miami Grand Prix altogether, as he is without a seat for 2025. It was a good weekend for Ferrari, considering really in terms of they probably had the 4th and 5th fastest car in terms of race pace. Obviously, we know how quick Lando Norris's car was. And Ferrari, with Leclerc, with Sainz, sprint qualifying 2nd for Leclerc, 5th for Sainz, and they both finished in those places. Leclerc, to be fair, has had the edge over Sainz throughout the weekend, apart from FP1, but again, Leclerc just seemed to be quicker, have more pace, really deliver, and fair play to him, because I thought he was fantastic this weekend. A double podium, beating Perez. As for Sainz, still fairly close to his teammate. He qualified for the 2nd row for the Grand Prix, just 1 place behind his teammate, and he did a good job. He's got a good haul of points, Sainz. The gap between him and Norris for 4th has come down, but Carlos Sainz is one of only 3 Grand Prix winners this season, so not a weekend he would have been hoping for, but a decent weekend for Ferrari when all is said and done. Now it's time to talk about McLaren. And McLaren then, with Oscar Piastri and F1's newest Grand Prix winner, Lando Norris. He has been waiting a long, long time for this. What an achievement from Lando. After to put the hurt and difficult result behind him where he retired from the sprint race that was completely not his fault, to fight back and to win. Let's not make no mistake about that. As my watch tries to get involved in this video. But what I will say is that what a race from Lando. He delivered, he did what he needed to do, he really had great race pace, showing that McLaren, with those upgrades, it could seriously cause Red Bull a problem going forward. Will it do it consistently? Maybe not, because Red Bull could bring upgrades going forward. Obviously, they do still have Adrian Newey's know-how in the building, so technically they could make improvements which could extend this ability, the car. But saying that, great weekend for Lando, and if Oscar Piastri can do what he did in the Grand Prix before his front wing damage without that package, McLaren could have a really, really strong season. They could be looking for second in the constructors this year. It looks a really strong package. Oscar Piastri got unlucky. Had a good race in terms of the sprint. He finished 6th. He just did what he needed to do in the sprint, and he put a result together on the table for what it was going to look like in the race. But unfortunately, incident with Sainz completely ruined his afternoon. He did set the fastest lap, which took it away from other competitors in McLaren, so that could be important come the end of the season. But a disappointing and a heartbreaking weekend for Oscar Piastri. That could have been him, but saying that, all accreditation goes to Lando Norris, and it'll be interesting to see what Oscar can do in Imola in 2 weeks' time. But right now, it's time to turn our attention to McLaren's engine supplier, Mercedes. Now with Mercedes and George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, two drivers who have had very different seasons so far. In terms of the fact that, Russell has seemingly had the edge over Hamilton in the Grand Prix this year, and certainly qualified. But it wouldn't be that way this weekend. And Hamilton had decent pace. The qualifying still an issue that saw Russell ahead of Hamilton from Hamilton's point of view, but to finish 6th was stronger than the Grand Prix. The sprint race penalty, he has to take responsibility for that. Whether people think he was at fault or not for the incident into turn 1 is totally irrelevant from the fact that he did end 16th with that penalty anyway. And obviously the battles with Kevin Magnussen were probably lovely to watch from a neutral side, probably from Lewis Hamilton's fans and Kevin Magnussen fans, not too much, but it was a good battle. It was getting a little bit it was getting very physical and very close to contact multiple times. But a good weekend for Hamilton. As for George, wasn't really on the pace with Lewis in terms of race pace. Was kind of flawed, I guess, to be honest with you, with his starting position. And was stuck in a DRS chain in the sprint, couldn't really make his way through. He did finish though 8th in the Grand Prix behind Tsunoda, but still points nonetheless, and Mercedes need to take that right now because it has been a really, really tough year for them. Moving on though to Aston Martin. And Aston Martin then with Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, two drivers who, it was a difficult weekend for Aston Martin, and, when you look at the results, 17th in a DNF in the sprint, and Alonso finished 9th in the Grand Prix, and Stroll finished 17th. A weekend, to be fair, where, judging by the results, yes, Alonso was clear of Stroll again. However, saying that, Stroll did out-qualify him in the Grand Prix, so give the credit there. And he also out-qualified him in the sprint, I'm pretty sure. So Stroll had a strong qualifying performance, not the race performance, but just 2 points from this weekend is one to forget for Aston Martin. Obviously, two of them coming together in the turn 1 instant. Again, make your own opinions of that crash, but certainly from my point of view, I think just another weekend to forget for Aston Martin. Hopefully as they come into the European tracks they can find more of a rhythm and start hammering home some more points. But yeah, not to be for Aston this weekend. Moving on though to Visa RB. Visa RB announced their flamboyant livery for this weekend. If you've not seen it, go and have a Google of it, because my word, that was something. Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda. Ricciardo coming off the back of that result in Shanghai. I mean, these RB coming off the back of Shanghai weekend with a double DNF. Ricciardo's and Tsunoda's dealt with by other drivers. Magnussen coming into Tsunoda, taking Tsunoda out the race, and Stroll running into the back of Ricciardo, damaging his floor and leaving them both out the race. In Miami, great sprint qualifying from Daniel Ricciardo, P4 on the grid, absolutely immense from Daniel Ricciardo. He got fourth on the grid. He finished fourth after some splendid defensive driving up against Carlos Sainz, a race winner this year. Absolutely immense. And also Carlos Sainz, by the way, in a Ferrari, the second best car on the grid in net terms in the constructors versus the sixth. You know, absolutely immense. No one saw it coming. Great defensive driving, but just the way Ricciardo's season's gone this year, 18th for the Grand Prix and finished 15th, but a good sprint for Ricciardo. Definitely highlight the year so far. As for Tsunoda, good recovery drive in the sprint and get a point alongside his teammates. Hull. He started 15th, finished 8th, and started 10th in the Grand Prix and finished 7th in between two Mercedes. So a decent weekend, very decent weekend in fact for Visa RB. Good haul of points for their championship battle, probably likely to be with Haas this year, but still good result. And let's move on to Haas now and talk about them, and one of their drivers had a very interesting weekend. There we are then. So Haas, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, sprint result for Magnussen, full 18th after penalties. I'll get Hülkenberg out of the way first. He finished 7th in the sprint, got a couple of points, and finished 11th in the Grand Prix. Haas go pointless in the Grand Prix, while V's RB score with Tsunoda, not ideal. In terms of Magnussen, but quick word on Hülkenberg, consistent as always, and he's done a good job. As for Magnussen, 3 penalties in the sprint, 2 penalties in the Grand Prix, another penalty last time out in Shanghai. He's 2 points now away from a race ban. He's got 10 in total out of 12. He has to be so careful not to get a race ban. I mean, he got 2 penalties for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. He also got a penalty for exceeding track limits. He was on 8 penalty points going into the Grand Prix. He came away on 10 after the crash with Logan Sargent. A mixed weekend for Haas. Magnussen's robust driving and very physical driving definitely showed. And they did get a couple of points in the sprint, so to quote Tesco, every little helps. So, you know, it's a mixed weekend for Haas, and they'll hope to bounce back in Imola. On to Alpine now, who got their first point of the season. The team who finished 6th last year have got their first point of the season in round number 6, and an very interesting weekend for Alpine. They did look to have signs of improvement coming up to. Gasly showed some strong pace early parts of this weekend. In terms of results wise, Ocon qualified 13th in the sprint, finished 15th, qualified 13th in the actual qualifying and finished 10th. Gasly qualified 16th, finished 9th in the sprint and qualified 12th and finished 12th in the Grand Prix. So mixed results. Actually, to be fair, pretty similar. It's just the only fact that Ocon got a point and Gasly didn't. But still a decent weekend for Alpine, a step in the right direction. 2 fairly talented drivers. Ocon's incident with Charles Leclerc in the pit lane was very interesting indeed. He started the race with a 10-second penalty for the sprint after an unsafe release and a collision in the pit lane on the way to the grid, which is highly unusual. But Gasly was behind his teammate this weekend for the majority, but he did do his best, and the Alpines were fairly close together. Moving on now to Williams. Oh dear, Williams. So, Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, for the first time in 34 races, Logan Sargent, I'm pretty sure, in terms of sprint and Grand Prix, Logan Sargent out-qualified Alex Albon. Due to Alex Albon's time being deleted, Logan Sargent was 19th and Alex Albon was 20th in qualifying. Albon would start, though, from the pit lane due to parc fermé conditions and making changes. So the stewards decided to make him start from the pits. And in the actual sprint race itself, Alex Albon finished 13th, Logan Sargent finished 10th. A good result for Logan Sargent. I mean, he was elevated to 10th by the penalties, but you've got to be there. You've got to earn your own luck. And unfortunately, his luck was nowhere this weekend. If he finished in the top 10 in the Grand Prix, he would have got a point on home soil. The man from Florida. However, it wasn't to be. Alex Albon qualified 14th for the actual Grand Prix and finished 18th. And Sargent qualified 17th for the Grand Prix and didn't finish after the incident in Magnussen. A real shame for Sargent. There are rumours floating about that Sargent could be replaced by Andrea Kimi Antonelli for Imola. However, those rumours have been quashed by Williams, but you just never know. It looked like Sargent was just about finding his feet and his confidence at his home round, and until he got taken out by Kevin Magnussen, he probably was. A really unfortunate round for Sargent and for Williams, and another round where they go pointless, and another back to the drawing board weekend as well. Last but not least, we have Kick Sauber, Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guan Yu. And let's begin then with Zhou. Had some good pace this weekend and largely better than his teammate. He qualified 17th in the sprint, finished 11th. Qualified plumb last in the Grand Prix, qualified and finished 14th. Bottas qualified 18th in the sprint, finished 14th. Qualified 16th for the Grand Prix, finished 16th. Bottas with a new engineer. Just another really, really sour weekend for Sauber. They announced over the two races that Nico Hülkenberg will join them next year, which means one of Zhou or Bottas won't be there. That is for them to decide. I don't know who you guys think that will be. Leave your comments and who you think it will be down below. But yeah, another poor weekend for Sauber, and another one where, like Williams, they need to find something and fast. So then let's take a look then at the driver's standings, and Max Verstappen, no surprise there, has a 33-point lead over at the top of the driver's standings ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. He sits second, just a 5-point gap over Charles Leclerc. He's third. Lando Norris has overtaken Carlos Sainz. In terms of race finishes this year, they are level on points now with 83. Piastri is 6th on 41. Tsunoda has gone into the top 10 ahead of Lance Stroll with 14 points. Stroll's gone pointless this weekend. Ricciardo and Ocon get their first points, while Albon, Sargent, Bottas, Gasly and Zhou are yet to score. In terms of the constructors, Red Bull have still got the lead in the standings, and they've extended their lead over Ferrari. Red Bull with 239 points, Ferrari with 187. McLaren are sit third with 124. Mercedes are fourth with 64 points. They've got 60 points between McLaren and Mercedes. A lot of catching up for Mercedes to do. Aston are still fifth. RB have extended their gap over Haas. Alpine's first point with Esteban Ocon means just Sauber and Williams are left to score. That is it then. This is the Miami Grand Prix roundup complete. And what a weekend it has been. A weekend of high excitement, energy and thrilling action. Lando Norris became a winner for the first time in Formula 1. He took first after retiring in the first race of the weekend in the sprint with Lance Stroll. A nightmare weekend for Aston Martin, who just accumulated 2 points over 2 races. Their gap between Mercedes and themselves opens up, and the gap below them to Visa RB closes. Max Verstappen maintains a championship lead, and he still came first in one race and came first in every single session of the weekend, apart from the where it mattered in the Grand Prix. Lando Norris makes history. He becomes the newest Formula One Grand Prix winner. I will be back next time when Formula One ventures into Europe for the first time this season at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Italy, and the start of a fascinating European season where Formula 2 and Formula 3 will return for the first time since Melbourne. They should be excited. It should be exciting for F1 fans to see Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Berman and many, many more drivers attempt the Imola circuit. But thank you very much for watching. If you are new around here, please like and subscribe. And it was history for Lando Norris, history for McLaren, their first win since 2021 with the driver of Lando Norris. And could it be a very special season for McLaren? I will see you at Imola, but until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.